Well, it's official. The official people officially think Donald Trump was officially outrageous in how he treated Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky last week. Here's a short clip of the toughest part of that interaction.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
That.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
I'm not
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war,
you're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Playing cards.
But right now, you don't.
Yeah,
you're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
even
entire
today,
meeting, you said thank you.
Even today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
I won't show you the preceding half hour of the meeting, but if you watch it, you can see how Zelensky repeatedly prickles at Trump and J.D. Vance until they finally take the bait. I didn't know this until afterwards, but this was actually the third meeting where Zelensky was supposed to sign a treaty with America that he refused to do so. Here's the U.S. Treasury Secretary explaining it.
President Trump sent me there we were supposed to bring the Ukrainian people closer to the U.S. people, send a strong signal to Russian leadership that they had not only shared values, but now shared economic interest, and also have a strong signal for the American people that their tax dollars were actually going to work. Instead, President Zelensky and I had a very tough 45-minute meeting at a very loud decibel level, and I kept telling him, Mr. President, the purpose of this is to show the Russians there is no daylight between us. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, I'm not signing this. And I said, at the end of the meeting, I said to him, what do you want to go out and tell the press? I said, because I don't want to go out and show the Russians that there's daylight in between us. And he said, well, I'm going to go out and say I'll sign it in Munich. Then he got to Munich and he ran into Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio, very different than Vice President Harris and Secretary Blinken. But he didn't sign the agreement. So finally, we were supposed to have the signing today. It was supposed to be a great day. And this is one of the biggest own goals in diplomatic history.
After his disastrous meeting with Trump, Zelensky flew to London, where he received a hero's welcome. All of the rest of the NATO leaders and other Europeans were there cheering for him. It was the same online. World leaders were very quick to tweet their support for Zelensky. But what does that mean to say you support Zelensky? What does support mean? Is that too philosophical a question to ask? Trudeau likes to use the word victory when he talks about Ukraine, that Trudeau will be with Ukraine until victory. But what does that mean? I was surprised that the CBC published this video actually talking to Ukrainian troops who say they're just overwhelmed by Russian equipment, but mainly Russian manpower. This is from just a few weeks ago.
How are things going? I mean, last time I talked to you was 3 months ago. How is the situation on the front line?
For real, I think situation not really good for me. It's we're all tired. We're all tired. We wanna peace.
We need manpower. We need equipment. The main thing is the abundance of Russian equipment is just too much. There's too many soldiers and stuff. But yet we're holding the line. Somehow we're holding it.
To me, this tweet was perfect. It's from the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. No, I haven't heard of him either. Luxembourg is really just a city of about 1 million people, but he is a prime minister. And he said this on Twitter. He said, Luxembourg stands with Ukraine. You are fighting for your freedom and a rules-based international order. Here's what I wrote back. I said, me and the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, we're pen pals now or something. But here's what I said on Twitter, and this seemed to resonate because 5 million people watched it. I said, Luxembourg has a grand total of 939 people in its army. You have 2 unarmed helicopters and a cargo plane. That's not a joke. I actually looked it up. I must have hit a nerve with that because millions of people viewed it in a single day. Some people said that wasn't a fair point because Luxembourg is just a city landlocked in Europe. What's the point of having a big army? To which I respond, exactly. It would be like the mayor of Winnipeg tweeting that he stands with Zelensky. You say you stand with Ukraine, but you are actually standing somewhere else. You're not in Ukraine standing with them. As in, you are where they are, standing with them, either in Kiev or actually in the battlefield. Obviously not. And if not, are you really standing with them? You say you support them. Morally, you're giving them some moral support. Okay. But how about actual support? France and the UK have both talked about sending actual troops there, but when pressed, they mean as peacekeepers, as in after the war is already over. Of course, there's sending money. That's a form of support. And there's sending equipment. And there's training the Ukrainians. And all of that has been happening. But Russia has 3 times the population of Ukraine. It's just overwhelming the troops. Take a look at this chart here. It shows foreign aid for Ukraine ranked by country. America has given as much as the rest of the world combined. I've seen other charts with slightly different numbers on them, but the gist is the same. This may be a European war, but it's American taxpayers putting the money and equipment on the table. Trump campaigned on ending that, and he is ending it or trying to. That's distasteful to many people because, for one thing, when you make a peace treaty, you're generally doing so with someone who has been at war with you. So it's tough to go from calling someone evil incarnate for 3 years to shaking hands with them and signing agreements with them and ending sanctions on them. But that's how it works in wars. The alternative is, an unconditional surrender, as Germany and Japan did after the Second World War. That's a war, though, that cost the lives of 15 million soldiers, another 25 million wounded, and probably 45 or 50 million civilian deaths. That's the problem with tweeting your support from Luxembourg. You're pretty far away from the front lines where young men are being put through the meat grinder every day. I say young men, but actually the young men are gone now. They're either dead or they've fled the country as refugees. The average age of Ukrainian soldiers is now 43 years old. A generation of young Ukrainians have been killed in this war. There's a long-standing meme on social media that claims 80% of boys born in the Soviet Union in 1923 did not survive it through the Second World War. The BBC had a historian fact-check that and found it generally accurate, although many of them died from other terrible things besides the war.
Did almost 80% of the males born in the Soviet Union in 1923 not survive World War II? Well, here's Mark Harrison, who got the answer by looking at figures compiled in a book released in 1993 by 3 Russian demographers.
It's not correct. It's somewhat overstated. I think the true figure would be nearer 2/3. 2/3 of this cohort were dead by the time the war was over. I think the only misleading thing about the line on the internet, the deeply misleading thing is it implies that all these people were killed in the war. And that's not the case. This is just a poor country in which lots and lots of babies and young men died anyway. And then of the ones that were left, there was then this extra burden of war casualties. But in fact, the war was not the most important source of mortality between 1923 and 1946.
So 8% of the males born in 1923 hadn't died by the end of the war. 2/3 had. That's still a lot of young males dead. Mike Haynes says census data gives the same result.
What we mustn't do under any circumstances is diminish the catastrophic nature of the Second World War and the population losses in the Soviet Union. Around about 27 million is the estimate of what's called excess mortality. And there's a margin of error there. And to put that figure into perspective, the margin of error in the Soviet data is probably greater than all the wartime losses in Britain. So that's a measure of how many people died.
The point is, it cost an entire generation of Russian men. Just like the Civil War in the United States culled an entire generation of young men, particularly in the South. So yeah, you support Ukraine with everything and anything except for actual help. The thing is, many of the complaints about what happened in that White House meeting are compelling. Why Russia is wrong, why Ukraine deserves help, but they're all just stop at the someone ought to do something point. It's like that fake song in that movie, I don't know if you ever saw it, called Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Russell Brand was hilarious in that movie, and he made a fake song in a fake band called We've Got to Do Something. Here, just take a look for a second.
We got to do something. We got to do something. Before Mother Earth gets any more hurt, we got to do something. I'm out of breath, there's a lot of bad stuff in the world today.
We've got to do something. It's a really funny song, but here's the outgoing German foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock. The speech is in German, but there's subtitles. Just FYI, she's part of the Green Party. Those are the eco-peaceniks. Here, just watch a little bit of this speech by the Green Party cabinet minister in Germany.
Viele von Ihnen werden heute Nacht angesichts der unsäglichen Videos aus dem Weißen Haus unruhig geschlafen haben. Ich ehrlich gesagt auch. Leider war das kein schlechter Traum, sondern heftige Realität. Unser Entsetzen ist heute größer als zuvor, aber ebenso unser Commitment für die Menschen in der Ukraine, für unsere eigene Sicherheit und für den Frieden in Europa. Der gestrige Abend hat unterstrichen, eine neue Zeit der Ruchlosigkeit hat begonnen. Eine ruchlose Zeit, in der wir die regelbasierte internationale Ordnung und die Stärke des Rechts mehr denn je gegen die Macht der Stärkeren verteidigen müssen. Denn sonst kann kein freies Land mehr ruhig schlafen, das einen stärkeren Nachbarn hat. Das alles hat sich bereits seit geraumer Zeit abgezeichnet. Und deswegen haben wir seit längerem an neuen, gestärkten Bündnissen mit all denen in der Welt gearbeitet, die bereit sind, weiter für eine regelbasierte internationale Ordnung und die Stärke des Rechts anstatt das Recht des Stärkeren einzustehen. Wir müssen selbst als Europäerinnen und Europäer stärker als jemals zuvor vorangehen und entschlossen für unsere Interessen und das Völkerrecht einstehen, und zwar ohne Wenn und Aber. Für uns ist deshalb klar, wir stehen felsenfest an der Seite der souveränen und freien Ukraine. Die Ukraine ist Teil des freien und demokratischen Europas. Wer in diesem Krieg gegen die Ukraine brutaler Aggressor und wer mutiger Verteidiger ist, wer hier Täter und wer Opfer ist, das steht vollkommen außer Frage. Die Welt schaut auf uns, insbesondere in Europa, aber niemand auf der Welt wartet, bis wir hier Verhandlungen in Deutschland abgeschlossen haben. Wir leben in unsicheren Zeiten, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Aber wenn wir in diesen Momenten, in diesen Tagen erneut, wie schon einmal vor 3 Jahren, in Deutschland und in Europa die richtigen Weichen stellen, dann wird Europa zeigen, was es im Kern ausmacht. Ein starkes Friedensprojekt, Frieden in Freiheit für seine Millionen Bürgerinnen und Bürger. Ein Friedensprojekt, das in die Welt ausstrahlt. Slava Ukraini, es lebe Europa.
So she's very passionate about Ukraine. And she says Germany has to do something, as Russell Brown would sing it. She should at least sing it. But how can they do something? Germany hasn't just demilitarized, it's deindustrialized, in no small part because of the Greens. You know, there are literally 40 U.S. military bases in Germany with about 50,000 U.S. troops over there. Sister, you can't even defend yourselves, but you're ready to go on an adventurous war in Ukraine? Actually, she's not. That's the whole point. She's not. She just wants to do something. I get it. Look, me too. Actually, I don't think another multi-country land war in Central Europe is the answer to pretty much anything in life. But all these really cool Europeans think so. But you can't do that if you've denationalized your countries, if you've demilitarized your entire continent, if you've deracinated your people, if you've removed the motivation for young men to fight for their homeland. There's no industry left in Germany. Well, there is, but it's shrinking as they decarbonize. There's no military, just a post-national, post-industrial place where they listen to weird music. Here's Nick Kroll having some fun with that.
Want to know everything you want to know about coming to Europe? Well, watch this video from the Spotted Ox hostel, the coolest hostel in all the countries of Europe. For breakfast, we'll do something cool, like have a cigarette and like a bar of chocolate. And then we go for work for like 1.5 hour, 2.5 hour. And then we'll go for lunch. And lunch is usually, you know, something cool, like a cigarette and like 2-3 bottles of red wine, and then like a bowl of heavy cream. And then dinner, you know, we'll do something healthy, like, 4-5 sausages, and then like a chocolate cigarette. And then we'll invite our cigarette outside to take an espresso and watch the street life. And we so much can eat as much as we want, and we never get heavy because of olive oil. So that's what we say.
So yeah, if you're a Green Party politician or the prime minister of a city called Luxembourg, you do a lot of deep thinking, and you may actually be right about Ukraine, but the answer to every single time you say we've got to do something is, you and what army? And that's basically what Trump asked Zelensky, you and what army? You heard that Green politician talk about a rules-based international order. Did you catch that? And look again at that Luxembourger's tweet. He uses that same language. You are fighting for your freedom and a rules-based international order. That's a phrase Chrystia Freeland uses endlessly. It's one of those phrases that sounds very bland, and so you don't really even think about it. I've been hypnotized by that phrase. You know, I remember my friend Terry Corcoran at the Financial Post was always writing, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, about the World Economic Forum in Europe, and I confess I was so bored by the words World Economic Forum that I never really cared about it until I actually realized that that name was a kind of camouflage to hide what they were doing. Same thing with the phrase rules-based international order. By the way, here's Chrystia Freeland talking about the rules-based international order at the World Economic Forum in 2019.
The rules-based international order today is facing greater challenges than it has at any time since the Second World War, at any time since it was created. And that's very serious. You know, I sometimes scare myself when I say that. But I also think that we are starting to figure out how to navigate this new world and to, we're starting to figure out ways for the rules-based international order to fight back.
She doesn't quite explain what she means there, though, does she? Here she is in a 2017 interview. So this was during Trump's first year in his first term. And I'll tell you what rules-based international order means. It means a bunch of socialists like Chrystia Freeland and a bunch of Euro-socialists I've discussed already teaming up to tie down the United States like Gulliver in Lilliput. Rules-based means using the United Nations and other multilateral clubs to tell America what to do and what not to do. Not using the hard power of money and military might, but the soft power of lawyers and journalists and bureaucrats and USAID and the World Economic Forum and all sorts of other NGOs. Rules-based international order means making rules to stop America, never to stop China.
We are at a time and a place when international institutions need to be reinvented and renewed. And I argued today, and I believe so strongly, we need to double down on that international rules-based order. And doing that is the best way. I believe it is the only way to ensure safety and security for Canadians. There are only 36 million Canadians. A Fortress Canada approach is not going to be an approach that will maintain our prosperity or our safety.
So you talked a lot about America today. Are you saying we need to go it alone and put some separation between our foreign policy and America's foreign policy? You referenced it a lot in your speech today. What exactly are you saying about Canada's role now?
My central conviction is about Canada recommitting to building our leadership in our multilateral alliances. Having said that, we also need to be honest with ourselves and with Canadians. And we need to be honest about the fact that the election in the United States last fall, for many Americans, was an expression of a weariness with the burdens of global leadership.
You said they're questioning global leadership.
Exactly.
So if they're questioning global leadership, you're saying we have to take a sovereign, almost a sovereign approach.
We have to appreciate that we as Canadians, our country, a middle power, is a huge beneficiary of this international rules-based order. And we have to step up.
So let me explain. The rules-based international order, in case you're wondering, is a system or a scheme or an ideology or a plan whose purpose is to let poor, weak socialist countries box in the United States. The rules-based international order is what Europe has just used for the past 3 years to convince the mentally frail U.S. president or whoever his deep state handlers were to give more than $100 billion to a war that Europe claims to care about, but doesn't really care about when measured by anything real like blood or treasure. A rules-based international order is how countries convince or try to convince the United States to deindustrialize by adopting the global warming cult and carbon taxes. A rules-based international order is how the United Nations is weaponized mainly against America, but also against America's allies like Israel. A rules-based international order is how you get insane things like a plastics registry championed by Canada. You know what this reminds me of? The most European American there is, John Kerry. You know who I'm talking about? Former senator, most recently Joe Biden's global warming ambassador. We keep bumping into him naturally at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we always ask him about his private jets, and he just can't give them up.
Secretary Kerry, do you think that the high price of natural gas is actually a helpful thing to get people to transition to a green economy?
I'd love to talk about it, but I just can't do it on the run.
How can you justify being here when you yourself take private jets? Can you answer that? But you've taken a private jet before. No, but you've taken a private jet before to collect a climate change award. You have done that.
I fly commercial, exclusively.
Can I ask you, did you fly commercial to get here?
Partway, yes.
Partway, and then what?
What do you mean, and then what?
Well, you're an advocate against climate change.
The veg, please.
Excuse me.
Here. See?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kerry, we got interrupted last time. Quick question: why are you actually here now when you're not in any professional?
I'm sorry, sir. No questions.
That's okay. He can talk for himself.
I'm in the private sector.
You're in the private sector now.
Sure.
And you told us that you flew here privately.
Sorry, sir. We're not.
Too, you know. That's how you get here.
No, but you told me last year you got very upset that we implied that you took private jets. Yesterday you told us that you
waste my time with you.
So you said you traveled. What part did you travel here privately?
Sir, thank you, sir.
Is it now worth it? Is it now worth it in the private sector?
Sorry, sir, we're not
Is your
doing-
carbon footprint
I'm sorry,
worth
sir,
it
we're
now?
not doing any
Flying
interviews.
obviously
Sorry, we're
private
not doing any
jets.
interviews.
We ask him about his private jets every year, and he sort of answers us every year. And his answer is pretty much the same. And it's actually an honest answer. He says, look, I'm important and I'm busy. And so that justifies using a private jet with all its carbon emissions. As in, he says he really, really does care about the world's environment. But in the case of himself, it's more important that he fly to another meeting than save 100 tons of carbon or whatever. He admits it's a contradiction, but he makes the choice. And surprise, surprise, he chooses the private jet. So he believes in what he's saying, just not to the point of actually having to inconvenience himself. Just like the foreign minister of Germany. She's a deeply believing and deeply feeling woman. She's a member of the Green Party with everything that entails. She wants an army for righteous moments like this, but she'd prefer it if it were the American army or at least the Ukrainian army using American weapons. Does she really want an army in Germany? Now, that's a dangerous question, I suppose, but like Kaja Kallas, the foreign minister of the European Union, I think she really just wants to do some role-playing, some live action role-playing to play pretend, sort of like dress up. It's sort of like those Civil War reenactors, those hobbyists in the U.S. who pretend they're soldiers in the Civil War. I think that's what all these European politicians are like. So you've got every soft power, rules-based international order who wants the hard power of the United States, but only in ways that they approve of. So when Donald Trump wants a minerals deal out of Ukraine, they're appalled. Except you can't build a modern industrial economy without minerals. And don't they realize this puts American interests in Ukraine? Something that Putin would be very reluctant to shoot at as compared to the 1st Luxembourg Brigade. Give me 30 seconds. Let me show you a video released by the Norwegian army. Now, they're good people in Norway. I don't have a hard word to say about them, but seriously, feast your eyes on this. Now, I show you that because I have some news out of Norway. Maybe you saw it over the weekend. A refueling company based in Norway says it will no longer refuel U.S. Navy ships patrolling near Norway. They said this is because of how Trump handled Zelensky. Got it. But help me understand, why is the U.S. Navy patrolling the seas near Norway in the first place? Apparently it was this ship, the USS Delaware, a nuclear-powered attack submarine that was looking for diesel fuel to back up, for its backup generator. It's a nuclear-powered sub, but it also has a diesel generator. Now, I'm skeptical of this story, by the way. It feels like some social media activist used the Facebook account of this company to make a personal statement, but it's plausible that he spoke for the company. But here's what the USS Delaware looks like. I mean, it's just an awesome ship. I did some poking around. There's a couple of photos of it. It's pretty huge. Look at the size of the people on the top of it for scale. These are fast attack submarines. They cost more than $4 billion each just to build them. And then there's the massive cost to arm them and operate them and crew them and maintain them. They have a crew of 134 people. They're huge. They really move fast. Imagine that thing going 50 kilometers an hour. It's only about 5 years old, this ship. It's probably the most advanced attack submarine in the world. But like I say, what were they doing in Norway? I mean, why was it there? Why wasn't it protecting the United States, which is paying for it? Oh, this is why. The entire Norwegian budget is about $15 billion US a year. They can't afford to buy and then operate even a single nuclear attack sub like this. Now, they do have 6 baby subs. Well, they're babies in size. Here's a picture of 2 of them next to each other. but they're not babies in age. They were delivered in the 1980s. So they're in their 40s. They're older than most of the crew who sail in them. They're small. They just take 21 crew. Now, they're not nothing. And that's more than Canada can do, by the way. We allegedly have 4 submarines, but generally they don't work. In the whole year of 2019, for example, all 4 Canadian submarines, they were in port being repaired, or they just didn't sail. But can you guess why the Americans were sailing around Norway? And it's not just submarines. Here's a U.S. aircraft carrier recently sailing by Norway too. What's it doing in Norway? Well, if you guessed, the answer is because Norway, like the rest of the free world, really can't defend itself. That's the answer. They've made a choice not to defend themselves. That's why the United States has 40 bases in Germany. That's why the United States has a nuclear-powered sub in Norway, has a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in Norway. Norway's very rich, by the way. That's why Chrystia Freeland and the rest of the world's nagging Marxists lament the end of the rules-based international order, because to them, that means they get to be on par with the Donald Trumps and Pete Hegseths of the world. They get to have as much say as the J.D. Vances and the Marco Rubios. Why? Because of rules. But the rules didn't protect Ukraine, did they? American money and weapons did, and Trump wants to end that war. Maybe you'll disagree with the exact way that happens. Maybe you disagree with peace at all. Trump said it on Friday. Zelensky has no cards to play, and everyone can see that. So if you want a rules-based international order, you've got to do what Teddy Roosevelt said about 120 years ago. You should walk softly and carry a big stick. Sometimes people listen to America and Donald Trump because they make intellectually persuasive arguments. Sometimes people listen to America because they make appealing commercial arguments. But at the end of the day, America calls the shots because American taxpayers and American soldiers have a good answer to that question. We've got to do something. They have an answer for the something. And they have an answer to the question, you in what army? Joe Biden and his nurses, or whoever was running the show, agreed with the weak world powers around the world who wanted to milk America for all it had. Trump's going in a different direction, and he campaigned on that. Now, that doesn't mean there's no role for Chrystia Freeland and 100 other pundits like Kaya Kallas and that Luxembourg guy. Their role is to tweet, I guess. I mean, they could reindustrialize and remilitarize, but that's too yucky and nationalistic and fascistic for them. So for now, I guess they'll just sort of watch from the stands and heckle. By the way, I haven't said a lot about Canada today because no one is really paying any attention to Justin Trudeau or our Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, but you can expect Prime Minister Mark Carney to be the absolute worst in the world at this soft power stuff. He was the original ESG, environmental social governance, corporate soft power oligarch. Boy, we are cruising for a bruising here in Canada too.